Fantastic. So today I'm talking with Oliver Bruce, who's the founder of Pinpoint Media, which was acquired by Pretty Green Group in 2025, and is now one of the founding partners of Caplia, which is a platform that supports entrepreneurs during their fundraising process. So firstly, thank you for joining me. It's great to chat with you.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Awesome. So, in the time that we have available, I wanted to delve a little bit deeper into how you got started as a founder.
Yeah.
A lot of the people that will be watching this are going to be first time founders who are just breaking into entrepreneurship. Then we also have potentially an audience of people who are more experienced, looking to kind of launch something new. So, what was your first venture?
Well, I guess the first venture is probably not really a venture as such, but when I was probably 13, I used to stand on the side of the road selling fruit and veg from the garden. It was kind of as simple as that. So stopping cars and selling them a marrow for 20p or whatever, right? So
Yeah.
I guess you could class that as the first venture. The first, I guess, legitimate business, if you will, was a production company, actually, back in the day at it was college, actually. It was called Straight Line Productions. I don't know if anyone's ever watched Wolf of Wall Street, but he actually called a company post Wolf of Wall Street Straight Line. I think it was consultancy. So I thought that was quite funny that 10 years prior I'd called it Straight Line Productions. It didn't work. Anyway, long story short, got it all completely wrong. And then obviously went into the world that I'm currently in now. There were obviously slight things that I took over from the production company into the world that I'm now in. But yeah, from a commercial perspective, it definitely didn't make any money at all.
Fantastic. Great. Yeah, I think I've got a similar story at the sort of age of 13, 14. I was shipping over phone cases from China and selling them. It was good fun. Good fun.
Yeah, yeah, no. So you've got
Great.
to start somewhere, right? You've got
You
to
got to
do
start
something
somewhere.
in some way, shape, or form. Otherwise, you're not going to know what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And how did that evolve into what you did with Pinpoint Media? Where was the evolution
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, so I guess this production company that I had back in the day was very much because I wanted to be a television presenter, and having done a little bit of research into, the likes of Rowan Atkinson, Gordon Ramsay, for instance, Jeremy Clarkson, they all have their own production company. So I figured that starting a production company would allow me to then control the output and be on television. Quite naive, right? Anyway, long story short, realised that maybe television wasn't the place that I wanted to go, and actually having a production company, unless you scale it properly, you don't really make a huge amount of money. So pivoted from that into something that was specifically called, at the time, Pinpoint Gloucestershire. So I grew up in the Cotswolds in Gloucestershire, and it was supposed to be a kind of franchised app, if you will. So every single county was supposed to be able to have access to this app, but it was to be run by somebody in said county. But on that app, it was discounts, it was videos, it was information about venues and locations. This was probably 2011, right? 2012. So video wasn't massively used on websites. Apps were kind of a new thing back then. So that was kind of where I sort of sewed the production side of things into kind of tech, if you will. Anyway, started selling this app to businesses to feature on. They'd pay to feature on it. The consumer would be able to use it for free. And we made a bit of money, but I realised that A, nobody was going to the app. And the only reason businesses were paying us money was because they got a very, very cheap video. So for like 100 quid a month, they were getting a video for their website, which, a production company back then would have charged whatever. So kind of sacked the app off completely and then went into producing good high volume content for businesses and for brands to feature on their website and to feature on social. And then from there it kind of grew. I left university with 2 members of staff and an office. We did about 88,000 quid in our first year of business with that kind of refocused model. And then we grew the business, search, social, creative, and influencer. And then we exited in 2025 to Pretty Green.
Fantastic. And when you made that transition, was there like a problem or a single sort of focus, I suppose a problem that you were trying to solve with that media company? Or did you go, we'll just be general purpose media? Like, was there something you wanted
Yeah.
to solve for businesses?
Yeah, so the honest truth was that we basically wanted to undercut the market, and we wanted to stack as much content as high as possible and sell it for as cheaply as possible, and then make that margin in the middle. So we would go out there when a production company historically would do one video across a day, maybe more, and charge you 10,000 quid for it. We would go to a client, and we work with big brands. We won Barrett Redrow, which is now called Barrett Redrow, was formerly Barrett Developments, off the back of this model, and we've worked with them ever since. We would do 3 or 4 videos across the course of a day. We'd charge £250 a video, and we'd obviously bill the client 1,000 quid because obviously it accumulates, right? And it was me running around with a camera, bunging it back to the office, and then the guys editing it. And we'd try and stack as many of these clients across the course of a day as we could and produce high volume creative way before TikTok was even a thing, and way before high volume creative, which it is now, was so required, right? So clients were coming to us, and it was like a stock market. We used to send out a mailer to, I don't know, 20, 30,000 people. We initially downloaded these emails from just scraping people's websites, but eventually we then bought them. This was before GDPR. And we'd send this mass mailer out with this price point kind of model on there, and the phone would ring, and we would be making, good money across the course of a month or two from literally just sending out a mailer, making high volume video, and going from there. That was the kind of MVP. That was the kind of starting point for us, the product market fit, if you will. Over time, we got more refined. We realised where we should be charging, better margins, for instance, because we weren't making much margin with that price model until we got to a critical mass. It ran at a loss for a long time until it got to that critical mass piece. But that was how we did it. And we scaled and grew it from there. And I guess the rest is history. But there was a lot of learnings along the way. We had a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, obviously you tried to do the tech approach to start with. You tried an app. Obviously that was very much in the early days.
Yeah.
Was there any learnings from that in terms of what you found? Like, did you skip the validation process? A lot of what we talk about is validating idea before committing to building. Did you kind of skip that, or did you try that? Why did the app side fail?
I had it was super. It was no, you wouldn't know, right? You wouldn't know unless you know. And back then I didn't know, and people starting businesses now probably don't know themselves. So it's maybe an educational piece. But I just went straight to, let's just develop it. It's an idea. I want to do this, and let's bang it in the market and start charging. There was no plan around, is it the right product to release into the market? Is there actually a need for it, or is there just a need because I think there is a need? The reality is, back then, I think there was probably a need. I think there was a product market fit, but I didn't raise any money. I did it properly organically. I sold it in a county that I lived in and didn't go any wider than that. So there wasn't the marketing around, oh, okay, we're going to use this because we're going to a different county, if that makes sense. We want to see what there is out there. So massively naive. I think if I had raised millions of pounds, I could have probably taken it to an exit and scaled it. I mean, Pinterest launched at the same time that we did, right? With that app. And you see where Pinterest has got to. And we used to get so many meetings when I launched that app because people thought I was the founder of Pinterest because it was called Pinpoint. And then, and it was in media and whatever. So quite an interesting kind of point in time, because apps were such an interesting thing for people to start to develop. If you had an app, you were really innovative. With no code and vibe coding now, you can spin an app up pretty quickly. So it was really interesting. But yeah, we didn't do that litmus test. We didn't do that kind of product market fit bit. We just banged it out there and kind of hoped for the best. And that's, I guess, why we pivoted within about a 6-month period to going into a market we knew was sort of more profitable, because we could see clients using us just for that reason.
Really interesting. I mean, I suppose it was a good... It's the classic founder mistake that I've made myself many times, and we often see lots of people making, is, as you say, building something that you think is going to work, and then not having an understanding of how to distill that down into an MVP, into a first version. Do you think there's been any learnings for you if you were to try and do the tech side again? Obviously, you're working with Caplia and that side of things. Would you have a plan of action going forward as to how do I take this big idea and turn it into a version 1? Have you got any kind of insights around that?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, we're developing at the agency now tech anyway for us to run off, be that from a creative perspective, influence perspective, just frankly an analysis perspective as well. So, first-hand experience and having invested in Caplia, just going really deep, really narrow, and not trying to do everything at once, I think is probably the biggest thing that you can probably take away. So, for instance, when I launched my first app, which didn't work, I wanted to do everything straight away and make it as complex as it possibly could be, because I thought that was super important. But finding and honing in on a real niche and a real need, and then developing that really deeply to a point that actually it works, really, really well, but for one specificity or for one sort of area, I would suggest is probably the best place to start. And then once you have that kind of either in the market, or you can see that it's working, or you've got that product market fit, then you can start to do other bits on the side of it and start to broaden it a little bit. That would be a piece of advice that I wish I'd known.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and I think people forget that. They think when they're starting, especially a tech product, they're thinking that all the features will sell it, when
Yeah.
actually people are buying it as a solution to a problem.
Yeah.
It's just very easy, especially as a creative founder or myself with sort of the ADHD mindset and the ADHD approach. Is I will just come up with so many different ideas, think this is great, and then often it takes real self restraint to go, right, what do we actually need here to solve this problem, and what can be left till later. And that's what the most successful apps and SaaS products and all of that kind of thing do.
100%. We're
So
building agents at the moment in the business. Like we're building agents for people to be able to work with, to improve their role, to allow them to do things they want to do, and to basically pass off the monotony of the stuff they don't want to. Right. And one could very easily go, right, we're going to build an agent that does everything, but we're not. We're building 20 or 30 agents that specifically work on a specific task. And that was through exactly those learnings. We could have been broad, but we haven't. We've gone super niche. And, Steve Jobs used to say, what have you said no to today? And I think it's the same principle when developing anything, frankly, even frankly, growing a business, whatever industry you're in. Sometimes saying no is the hardest thing to do, but actually saying no to all these funky features because it's just distracting and it won't get you to where you need to get to, even though you think it might, it is very, very powerful in the early stages.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And how have you found that sort of going from the media world into sort of supporting the launch and the fundraising side with Caplia? How have you taken some of those experiences, and have you had any influence on that side of things, or
Yeah,
how did
for
that look
sure.
to get that launched?
Yeah, so I guess in terms of that, I've always been bullish and involved in the sort of founder startup scale up world. So, having organically grown my agency to an exit, I've always been interested in businesses that are raising capital, be it angel, PE or VC, and have written angel tickets myself kind of throughout the last, I guess, 3 or 4 years. So I've kind of fingers been on the pulse with regards to that, but it was super exciting when we actually had Caplia raise capital within a couple of weeks, literally, and then deploy only a week ago at Opus. I don't know if you know Opus, the entrepreneur kind of founders group, if you will. Have a look at it online. It's an amazing community, but we've plugged directly into their Easies Awards with Caplia, which is super exciting. So there's 3,000 or 4,000 people that will go through the funnel almost from day one straight into Caplia, and then beyond Caplia being able to use it if they so wish, essentially. So it's gone from, and I think over the last 6 months, I met Connor in our local pub just to talk through the concept, essentially, plugged some people in, raised some capital, and now we've deployed it and launched it on a valuation that 6 months ago just didn't exist. And we now will, in theory, have thousands of users come the end of the year, basically on the platform. We really do think that Caplia could be 100 million plus business quite easily.
Fantastic. And I suppose what you've really touched upon there is not just the product side, but the distribution. So one of the most overlooked parts of launching tech or launching any kind of MVP is, how do we actually distribute this? You can build a great product, but if no one's using it, that's the problem. That's the hard part. So what have you learned around the distribution side? Obviously working in media and obviously with Caplia as well. How would you suggest entrepreneurs solve distribution, getting eyeballs on the product?
I mean, there's multiple ways of doing it, and it depends on people's budgets, right? But I think the first and foremost is building either in public, which some people do. I've got some great friends that build some platforms or have built platforms in public. If you have a look at Callum Woodcock from Wineify, he's built his business in public. He's doing super well. So personal branding is also another part that goes hand in glove with that, right? And I think individuals who have an element of personal brand, a following, fame, if you will, I hate the word fame, but influence, you can drive customers quite quickly to a product or a solution. If you look at Millie from Salt, for instance, the I forget the name of it, the electrolytes brand. See, I can remember the brand name, but I can't remember the actual product. There you go, that's good branding. She's built a following. She's got 600,000 plus followers, right? And they built Salt organically, and she's been able to drive consumers to that brand because of that. So I think if you haven't got the capital to put into awareness, consideration, decision, marketing, and you want to be able to get eyeballs, the best thing is to be authentic and to get out there and to start talking to camera. Similarly, if you look at brands that have raised, Series A, they will start deploying capital in significant places because they want awareness, right? They're not necessarily always worried immediately about that profitable return on investment. They want market share. They want that land grab. So it does depend on where you are in your kind of journey. But if you are bootstrapping, if you are starting, if you are MVP, if you are kind of pre-seed, doing that kind of personal branding, making as much noise as you can, being as disruptive as you can. Good friend of mine, Matthew McNeil Love, who runs Thursday, famous for walking around with cardboard in London, right? They're wanting to scale to 9 figures plus, really, in the next couple of years, and they're doing super well, right? All off the back of just being quite disruptive. So, that for me would be the kind of gritty but functional way of doing it.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's just, it can be so difficult to break through nowadays. And it's just, yeah, a lot of the kind of well publicized ways of getting customers or ways of getting eyeballs on what you're doing doesn't seem to work as well. And I think just figuring out how to break through is the most hardest thing.
100%.
And I just want to touch back on Pinpoint Media for a while. Obviously, an acquisition in the agency space is quite interesting. It's not something that's super common. Lots of agencies are lifestyle businesses, or obviously service businesses are capped by headcount and that kind of thing. Was there a particular structure or vehicle that you put in place to take it from a media company to something that was essentially able to be acquired?
Yeah, 100%. So, over the journey that was Pinpoint, I guess, we'd very much gone from stacking things high and selling it cheap, which was the kind of MVP, the very beginning stages of the business, through to, more hand to mouth in terms of larger projects, better margin, but fewer of them, if you will. And then, over the last, I guess, 5 or 6 years, we pivoted massively into a retained model. And I know a lot of people find retainers maybe sometimes difficult to stomach. Agencies sometimes find them hard to implement. But for us, because we were doing the creative and we were giving the creative then over to the client, but the client was then going, but we're putting it on YouTube and we're not getting what we need to get from it. We realised that actually if we were to do the end-to-end, the creative and the deployment, it would be a lot stickier. So we ended up, in essence, doing the creative, doing the search, doing the social, and obviously putting the media spend behind that, which therefore meant we were able to charge 12-month retainers, 18 months in some cases. We've got clients that are actually on 3-year retainers, believe it or not. And that was one of the key things that allowed us to grow. And I keep sort of reminding you that we did it organically. We never took money from anybody, be it angels or otherwise. We reinvested the profits, but we built the business on a retainer model, which then when we were acquired, 75% of our revenue, maybe even 80% of our revenue was retained. So it was a lot easier for us to plug into a larger organization with that stability of, here's a load of clients, here's the retainers, let's do better work for these brands because we're a bigger organization now, rather than a lot of agencies which are a little bit more either 50-50 or frankly maybe sometimes even less in terms of retainer versus projects. And there's no right or wrong way of doing it. It depends on if somebody wants to exit a business, if somebody wants to just do project-based work, if someone wants to have a lifestyle business. But for us, or I guess for me, it was always very much, I'm building this business to, at some point, put into a larger organization and take it to another level that maybe I can't take it to, which is what happened. And it's pretty exciting over the last 3 months, having been in Pretty Green Group, seeing, what we're doing, who we're working with, and how a 100+ person agency actually operates.
Great. Yeah, it's interesting to hear you actually built it for that outcome, because I think a lot of people, me included, struggle to figure out, well, what's the outcome that I'm optimizing for here? Do I want an acquisition? Do I want to structure it in that way? Do I want a lifestyle business? All these kind of different, I suppose, keywords of what a business could be nowadays.
I think
was that something
as an individual what you're wanting to do, right?
Yeah.
Because if you want a lifestyle business, the chances are you're going to buy holidays, put watches through it, put a car through it, and live through that business in a way that won't allow that business to be saleable, period. Going through due diligence, and we went through due diligence for, I think it was 8 months, and it was properly interrogative. And it really is one of the most interesting, but one of the worst experiences that you can have when running a business, because everything you've built just gets poked, essentially. It's like, why have we done that? Why have we done that? Why have we done, even if it's correct. But the fact is, if you're running your business as a lifestyle business, if you think you're going to sell it in time, but still running it as a lifestyle business, it's super, super, super difficult because you've structured it incorrectly. So I do think it's important for founders to go, what am I wanting from this? Do I want it as a lifestyle business? Do I want to raise capital in time, take some money off the table, sell secondaries, something like that? Or do I want a cold hard exit? Because it is a very different way of structuring your business. Some don't even need to make profit, right? A lifestyle business, you wouldn't want to make profit. Whereas another business that's wanting to be sold does need to make profit. So there's two very different, maybe even three very different ways of operating there.
Yeah, fantastic. Brilliant. Last question, Oliver. Really appreciate the time and the detail and everything. So the last question would be, what's one thing that you're really excited about in your career, in your life for,
Yeah.
I suppose, 2026?
There's a huge amount, I guess, to be excited about, both in my personal life but in work life. But I guess if we look at this from a business lens, the fact that we are talking to some of the best known brands in the UK at the moment to run campaigns for them, because we've got access to some incredibly good people, both at group level but in our agency, and indeed clients that they're working with. That's super exciting. I know the guys in our business are like, holy shit, how have we got access to these incredible brands within like a 3-month period, right? Normally people think these things take a long time, but the reality is it's been very much let's go, go, go. And it's just great fun. So for me, that's a very exciting piece of the puzzle.
Amazing. Fantastic. Oliver, it's been an absolute pleasure. Really appreciate the time. And if you want any support from anyone or anything like that, can people reach out to you on the website or social media? What's the best way of sort of showing support for you and what you're working on?
Go to oliverbruce.co.uk is my website. You can listen to the podcast, The Unlock, on there. Or you can just reach out on LinkedIn, Oliver Bruce Online. And yeah, always happy to have a conversation, because it's not easy out there, but should be a lot of fun if you get it right.
Yeah, awesome. Spot on. Oliver, thanks for your time.
Cheers, thank you.